Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or remember you can hit that like button, subscribe button, and that all-important notifications button. Help the channel grow. Let's talk boxing. Let's get very, very technical. It is the return of the Matrix. And let's be honest, this is the path back to Teofimo Lopez. This is the path to overthrowing Teofimo Lopez. This is the start of the revolution. Whether he's able to achieve his aims or not, that's a whole different discussion. Personally, I make no bones about the fact that, to me, when they're all at their best, Vasyl Lomachenko is still the best lightweight in the world, and I believe with a little bit of luck, he will be able to get back to where he was and achieve his aim of becoming the undisputed lightweight champion. But of course, it's easier said than done, and part of the reasons he's targeting Nakatani is because he's a common opponent. He's a guy that has faced Teofimo Lopez, but make no mistake, Masayoshi is a massive obstacle to overcome. He's not only very, very tall at the weight, he's a very, very good fighter. A tall fighter that can use range at times. Sometimes he gives that up. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the areas that I believe he can have success, but also where I believe Lomachenko will ultimately exploit and will come away with the victory. So we'll get a little bit technical with that. But yeah, he's a tall fighter that can actually fight. That's game, that wants to fight. He doesn't focus on maintaining range and utilizing his height and reach to the maximum that he can, which can actually be detrimental to him sometimes, but it makes his style very, very fan friendly. But as you can see, the height dynamic between these two is absolutely massive. Now we're going to talk a little bit, like I said, about how he gives that up and why he gives that up and where there'll be areas for Lomachenko to be able to exploit. So let's get technical and let's start with this. I'm going to start with this first little clip here. As you can see, this is him against Teofimo Lopez. Now, as you can see, I've drawn on a little extra leg there. You're going to find out why in a minute. You've seen arrows and lines. I'll explain everything. So first and foremost, as you can see, he's up against Teofimo. They're just out of range here. Now, first and foremost, what you see here is that his foot is completely flat on the floor. And if you can see his head, it's directly in line with that lead foot with his back leant forward. This is just one example from the first round. What I'm trying to show you here is that his weight is shifted onto that front foot. Now, you can also see with that back leg coming out, can you see how it's quite a wide stance? That little extra leg that I drew on there, his leg could have been there. Now, if it's there, what tends to happen if you have a less wide of a base, a more narrow base? If Teofimo decides at any stage here to jump in, Teofimo's still walking into range, they're still out of range here. But if he then decides to jump in, you can shift your feet more quickly in and out to exit range or come off at an angle or do it whatever it is you want to do. Whereas in this position here, when you're on the front foot like this and you're leaning off that front foot, you are in hunting mode. It's very difficult for you to take a step back quickly from this position unless you push off of your front foot and use that to push backwards. The problem is with that, because his feet are so flat, as you can see here, the lead foot is completely flat on the canvas. He's not on the ball of his toe. He's not looking to be able to push back off if Teofimo jumps in. And if he was on the ball of his toe and he is leaning on the front foot like that, yes, it would give him that mobility to move away if he has to, but it also gives him an opportunity to pivot off of that front foot and produce, say, a powerful hook or a powerful jab. Instead, because he's completely flat on that front foot, it's very much an offensive stance. With that wide stance, he's not going anywhere. If Teofimo jumps in, what Nakatani is going to hope to do essentially is time him on the way in. Now, this is just something that I'm showing you just to show you the style of mentality that this guy has. He's not leaning off that back foot in the way Vitaly Klitschko would do. His feet are not narrow in the way Tyson Fury's are, so it can enable a shift back and forth quickly. He's got a wide stance, leaning his weight on the front foot, something you saw when David Haye was going to fight Tony Bellew in the rematch. And because of the Achilles injury he had, and he was unable to get around the ring as much as he would have liked, he became a hunter. And he started leaning off that front foot, looking to lead with power shots. That's how Nakatani is set up, despite the superior height and reach advantage. Now, moving on from that, what I want to show you, additionally to that, is that when he steps in with a jab, unfortunately the screen doesn't show his entire feet, but you can see from the angle of his legs here, look how wide his stance is. So not only does he have a wide stance, he then further extends that wide stance and he really pushes off. Look at the angle of his body. He's coming low to really push through that solar plexus with that jab. By doing that, he becomes a lot more stationary and more immobile. In other words, he's committing. Now, what it's letting him do is push right through the target. And if he does land on the solar plexus, you're really going to feel it, right? So he's focused on producing power. But the point I'm making is that once he lunges forward, he becomes totally committed to the position that he's going to land in, essentially. It's very much a forward momentum. You can see it from this angle as well. This is a left hand that he throws, which actually just misses the target. And we'll get to that in a moment about what this can mean. But again, look how far back his back leg is. He's not sitting there trying to follow it through and come inside. This isn't him trying to push in and then change the distance and then stay inside. This is him leaning from the outside into the shot by pushing through. He's pushing off of that foot. Even though he was initially leaning his weight onto his front foot, he's then pushing off of that back foot to really try and punch through the target. Now, I want to show you a little sequence as to how this can potentially be exploited by a guy like Vasyl Lomachenko. You can see here they're just in range, okay? Now, before I get into this, in fact, I'll tell you after this about his guard, his active guard. First and foremost, let's talk about this sequence. So you can see here, they're sort of at range. Nakatani's in a position where he's ready to jab. You can see that Teofimo Lopez has got that right hand clocked, but he's got that left hand low. He's almost luring him in. He's saying, come inside. This has pull counter written all over it. I mean, he tends to do that a lot, Lopez. He'll turn that left shoulder inside to try and catch any potential shot from the other hand, if it was a right hand, say. With a left hand even, he'll slightly turn away and then or dip down and then come back with that right hand. Now, what we see as that shot comes in, you see Teofimo Lopez decides to duck. His right hand's still clocked. You know he's going to go for a right hand to the head. Now, having to come over the top of that can be difficult, especially if that stiff arm remains there and he takes a step back. You can see the wide stance of Nakatani, so perhaps he's not going to be in a situation where he can pull out as quickly as he'd like. Nonetheless, in this particular position, he's not in great danger. Because even if the shot misses, there's enough distance between them where he can potentially rectify this. And as you can see, the forehead of Lopez is actually just, to be honest with you, it's not even fully in line with the red part of the glove. So Nakatani's not looking to punch through the target if it was to end here. So if the trajectory of the punch ended here, Nakatani would have been okay. He would have been not really taking a risk, shooting off a jab. But that's not what actually happens. If you follow this punch through to its end, that's where it ends. You see that? So the punch doesn't end there where he would be in a safe position. The punch actually ends further through the target. And now Teofimo Lopez's forehead is by his elbow. Look how much closer he is. Now let's look at those two things side by side. If the punch ends at sequence 2, that jab, even though it's missed, he's still in a position where he could potentially recover. Instead, he's pushed right through it. You can see his body start to lean more forward as he's tried to follow through. Look how wide his stance is. Now we move on to sequence 4, to step 4. The counter punch comes. You can see it lands on the head. And now look at number 5. I want you to look at the legs, the arrows of the legs. You can't see the feet, but look how wide the stance is of Nakatani. His lead leg is now in between the legs of Teofimo Lopez. Okay, he's overcommitted so much. His stance has widened so much that once he's committed and he's not landed, he's not in a position where he can adjust. And Teo can almost come around him. Something we know that Lomachenko is very good at, right? So if Nakatani is going to commit with those powerful jabs where he goes right through the target, he better make sure he lands. Now, when he targets the solar plexus, he can be effective at this, but he doesn't always find the target. And when he doesn't, that's when the opponent can find success with counter punches. Now, here's an example of him landing that jab to the solar plexus. Now, what I want to show you from here is not just the fact that he's jabbing to the solar plexus. I'm going to show you something about his active guard, but not using footage. I'm going to have to explain it to you here because I can't show you video footage. So you're going to have to make do with this rather mediocre face for a moment, just so I can show you what I'm trying to say here. He'll have an active guard. So as he's got his hands up, you'll see a lot of movement, and he'll step forward on his lead foot with a feint. And because he knows, as his opponent, he's really going to launch himself in from that foot. Even if he's shifted his weight onto his back foot, You know, he'll sometimes, like I said, he'll have it on his front foot like I showed you in that first clip. But if he has it on his back foot, when he's going to shoot that shot, you see that lead foot come all the way in. So he might be on his front foot and from there shoot, but then step in, or from his back foot, he'll step in as he's throwing the shot, but he's trying to punch all the way through the target. Now, what he tends to do with that, because there's that little stamp, he's trying to keep you guessing, is that foot feint an actual feint, or is he stepping in? He'll also use a lot of movement in his guard. It's an active guard. That lead hand's moving constantly. He's coming in and out. He's threatening to come in, the rotating of the shot, and then bang from there. You're sitting there, you're thinking, okay, I'm comfortable. He's not doing anything. He's fainting, bang. But what he does is as he's rolling that hand, as he's rolling that lead hand, he doesn't tend to throw a jab unless it's from high up from the shoulder. That's a potential tell. So it doesn't necessarily tell you when he's going to jab, but you can be pretty sure when he's not going to jab. So what he tends to do, you won't see him with his hands low and then throw an up jab. Okay, you won't see that happen. You won't see from the chest if he's sort of relaxed and then shoot from there. No, it doesn't come from there. As he's rolling, the hand comes up, then there's a shot. Hand comes up, shot. That's a potential tell. But when he's not throwing it to the head, and he's throwing it to the chest of the opponent, it's very hard to bypass. It's one thing to duck like Teofimo did, come off the side and counter and what have you. But because he's so long and he's aiming for the chest, to bypass that, to slip that to the side and come inside, if you're waiting for him to lead off, it's quite difficult. You can see in the top left-hand side of the screen here, this little clip, you can see how he will come low because his legs are so wide as he steps in. Now, that can lead to a counter shot opportunity, but because he's so long and he punches through the target, you see this land into Lopez's solar plexus, and it moves him all the way back. It's hard to overcome. Now, these next two clips are just jabs that show you where he tends to shoot the jab from. You see how his glove's actually above his shoulder here, but you see how his elbow's quite high and he shoots it from there. You see it again in the third clip here. That's where the jab comes from. It won't come from low, where the belly button is. It won't come from even lower than that by the hip as an up jab. He tends to throw it up, and that's what I was talking about when I was saying a potential tell there from Nakatani. But he's very, very difficult because of the feints to deal with this. How do you deal with this if you're letting him lead off? Well, the answer is trying not to let him lead off. If he is going to lead off, then yes, there is that opportunity where you step off to the side, something Loma can do, where you're essentially countering that shot if you're able to read that tell. But if you're struggling to read that tell early, and Lopez wasn't always reading that tell throughout their fight, this was a much harder fight than the scorecards suggest. There are certain things you can do. You can see Lopez here trying to engage that lead hand. You can literally punch that lead hand as you then try to engage. Punch it and then come inside. You've got to be careful of that straight right hand that's going to come from Nakatani. But essentially, if you engage that lead hand, you then know, right, I'll come off the line, coming at an angle to get past that right hand, and then all of a sudden I'm inside against this guy. And that's something that can bring a lot of success. Now, Lomachenko, we know, is a master at bypassing a long jab. Here are some examples against Pedraza of the varied ways he can do it. He can actually do something, as you can see in the first clip here, that's considered a bit of a no-no, and that is to come on the inside of the jab. The reason this is considered a bit of a no-no is because you're coming directly in line, if you're a southpaw, with the power shot. However, this is something that Josh Taylor's capable of doing too. We've spoken about this in that video where he fought Ramirez. He's so good at making himself unpredictable in the line that he's coming in and the height, that if he can go outside, he can come under, he can go inside. When he comes inside, he's already clocked. So can you see that left hand there? That left hand followed this sequence immediately. It's a quick slip and he's coming in low. You can see that Pedraza's hand here, he can potentially throw a short shot there, but it's almost in a defensive posture. Well, that left hand's now going to shoot straight through to the target. The other thing that he often will do, as you can see from this second clip here, I apologize the fact that it's fuzzy. It's obviously from the video. Because he's changing that height dynamic and coming up and down, changing that height. It's not just in and out, he's up and down, he's threatening to go outside or come inside. It makes you second guess yourself. And as you're pouring, because you're scared to shoot off like Nakatani, like I said, will want to shoot right through the target. Lomachenko will make him second guess that. With all that movement and all those feints, head feints, foot feints, entire body feints, it's very, very difficult to get a read on him. And the moment that you can see that that little jab became a pouring jab rather than a thudding jab, he shoots that lead straight shot, very, very straight shot, directly to the chin of Pedraza. So he can shoot with you under your jab, with your jab. He can throw it over too. So he can jab with you and try and get there ahead of you. Or he can come inside. From this third clip here, you can see that as he slipped inside here, this was an example of him first blocking a jab, and then as he's come inside, so it's almost like the first clip here, he's then shot that shot, but look how he throws it with the chin turned away behind his own shoulder. So that left hand will shoot a punch, but will also provide a shield for any potential right hand that is to follow. Now you can potentially find the body here, and Lopez did, but you're going to be eating a shot to the face for you to potentially land to the body, unless you're obviously, you know, aware of what he's trying to do and you're able to bypass that shot. Very, very hard to do. The other thing that Loma does that goes under the radar a little bit is his ability to walk a guy down, and he catches shots. You can see here in the last sequence, he's created like a turtle shell type defense. You can see his right arm is low, protecting against the body. The left arm bent in front of him. He's hiding behind that. He catches the shot there. He's stepping in, he's walking down. That right hand's going to come too. And that guard changes and he deflects that. All of a sudden he's inside, and that's when he starts to go to work. So Lomachenko can either feint his way inside, he can come inside by walking you down and catching shots, he can punch with you to close the range, he can come on the outside of you, he can come on the inside of you. This is a guy that is multi-talented and multifaceted at using his feet, but also his hands. Everyone talks about his feet. No one really talks about his hands and his ability to close the range when he comes in. Now, another thing that Lomachenko is, of course, fantastic at is getting on the outside of that lead shoulder. Here we see against Teofimo Lopez, he lands a straight right hand, a jab. And from there, he's landed it, he's blinded Lopez, and he's now got the advantage of being able to step on the outside of him. He wants the area on the outside of that left side, that left shoulder of Lopez, so that he's in a position to attack when Lopez is not. And as you can see in this first clip, he finds that. He's now completely off to the side. He lands a shot. Lopez needs to reset. By the time Lopez turns around, he's eaten a second shot. Now, with Nakatani and his overextension when he throws that shot, look out for this movement. Now, early in the fight, Lopez had some success with cutting this off because he was throwing the left hook, or he was simply pushing Loma away when Loma was trying to do this. And Loma wasn't taking enough risks. As Loma began to take a lot more risks and started to up the speed of the feinting and started to jump in more from the inside, slipping on the inside of those shots and became more unpredictable, Lopez struggled to read him. Now, I believe if they were to fight again, Loma would have figured out enough of the patterns where he could take risks earlier in the fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was even to go on to stop Teofimo Lopez, but that's analysis for a future video. The fact of the matter is, I believe that he's still the number one guy, and I believe what he's going to be able to do is a lot of this movement, which Nakatani's going to be aware of this. There's a potential threat here, right? So he would have worked on that, but with him coming on the inside, and he'll start to make Nakatani, in my opinion, fear his entry on the inside. You'll then start to see him stepping on the outside and getting outside that lead shoulder, where he'll be able to come at the side of Nakatani, whose stance will often be too wide, and he'll start to look very, very good at doing that. Although it will be difficult, in my humble opinion, to be able to get inside like that consistently. And what I believe we'll see early on, I'm talking, so he will have some issues early on, Loma, but I think just like the Pedraza fight, he will eventually come good. And I think by the end of it, people are going to start saying, wow, Loma's back, and he's going to start wanting that Teofimo Lopez rematch, and everyone's going to be talking about the Matrix Reloaded. So I'm looking forward to everybody's opinions, guys. Let me know what you think of the breakdown. If you disagree with anything, or if you do agree with it, I'm always looking forward to hearing everybody's opinions and feedback. Let me know how you think Lomachenko gets on against Masayoshi Nakatani. And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe button, notifications button, share the videos, help the channel grow. Take care. God bless everyone. Enjoy the fight.